Hey gang, don't forget, send any questions, comments, emails, videos, rants to cormancast@gmail.com. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to us on MeToo.
It's YouTube.
That's what I said. MeToo. Oh, that's the site is YouTube. YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube. Thanks for the glasses, Bobby. Welcome to the Corman Fantasy Cast, broadcasting from Temperate and Cozy Studios here in beautiful Hamilton, New Jersey. I'm your host, Kevin Eichels. With me, our guest host for this week, Mr. Joe Holliday. Welcome to the show, Joe.
Thank you, sir.
And I just want to start off by asking, what do you expect? What do you have in store for the Corman this year?
I'm very optimistic. I mean, I had the last pick in the draft. I was very surprised. I ended up getting DeAndre Hopkins with that first pick. Took a little bit of a reach with Le'Veon Bell with the suspension, but I'm hoping I can get through these first couple weeks and make my push on in the season.
All right, fantastic. Well, we appreciate you taking the time to come here today. We know you're a very busy man, so we're actually going to jump right into the meat and potatoes of this episode. We had our draft yesterday. We're recording this on Monday. We had our draft yesterday. We're still feeling the aftershocks from some of the things that went down.
Yes.
One thing I have to say, I feel like the draft this year was run very efficiently.
Yeah.
It was run very quickly. I think the fact that we were rotating and changing people who were filling out the big board, I think that definitely helped move it along more quickly. Because let's face it, as amazing as our fearless leader is, he has the attention span of a small child, and to ask him to stand up there for 3+ hours and record names and keep order was just not fair.
Yeah.
So kudos to the commish for running a great draft. Antonio Brown, first player off the board, first player selected by Boomer, who had the first pick, and actually 7 of the 14 first-round picks were wide receivers, 4 running backs, 2 quarterbacks, and a tight end. Joe, what is the overload of receivers in the first round? What does that say to you, that plethora of receivers being drafted in terms of where fantasy football is headed?
Honestly, I think the receivers are a lot more out there than they used to be. Like, it used to be running back heavy. Now it's more of a pass-happy league, and
right.
A lot of top receivers get it done. It favors the receivers with the pass interferences and whatnot.
Yeah.
And the 3-down running backs is almost non-existent anymore.
Right, and let's face it, a lot of times you only have one running back on the field at a time, and you just have more opportunities with wide receivers to get touches on the ball.
Yeah, I agree. I was kind of surprised after the Romo injury that the people weren't afraid of taking the Dallas players like early on in the draft. I mean, James Flames Plunkett drafted Ezekiel Elliott with the 5th pick, and then Brian a couple picks later and taking Dez Bryant.
Yeah, I mean, it really was surprising to me that those 2 in particular held form. Knowing what happened to the Cowboys last year after Tony Romo went down, I mean, it tells you that our owners really have faith in Dak Prescott to come in and to at least keep the Cowboys afloat, to keep those fantasy points coming, at least until Tony Romo comes back. And then, of course, you're not worried about those 2.
Yeah, I mean, we saw what he did in the preseason. The numbers were great, but again, it's mostly against backups. But if you think, a lot of teams will probably try and stack the box against Ezekiel Elliott, and he's got the speed and the power where if he breaks through that front line, I think he could really just be a home run hitter. And that might also help Dez Bryant with more teams stacking the box and leaving him maybe in one-on-one coverage.
Absolutely, yeah. And now, so let's talk about some of the specific picks that were made. Let's talk about some reaches that people made. I mean, look, I think everybody who was at that draft yesterday will tell you that probably the owner who reached the most, and when we say reach, what do we mean, Joe, when we say a reach? I mean, a reach is someone who basically what?
Yeah, they're just taking rounds or picks way too early.
Way too early. And I think we could all agree that Bobby made some really baffling picks.
Oh, Bobby, you really pissed me off.
I mean, you could start just with the fact that he took Cam Newton in the first round. I mean, you knew somebody was going to take a quarterback early.
Yeah.
But look, I mean, one of the rules of thumb in fantasy football is, basically you don't want to take your quarterback too early.
Yeah,
Bobby
I was
jumped right
surprised. Also, my brother Chris took a quarterback in the first round, also with Aaron Rodgers, and which kind of helped me because I had no clue DeAndre Hopkins would fall to 14.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And getting back to Bobby, he also took Steven Gostkowski, kicker for the New England Patriots, in the 8th round. I mean, some people are still filling out their starting lineup with their skill players at that point.
To follow up with Dan Bailey in the second to last round. So let's see if that 2-kicker strategy really pays off for him there.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, to have two kickers on your roster for opening weekend, I would imagine he's probably going to drop one of them before kickoff
I agree.
on Thursday night. Now, in terms of people who dropped, I think one of the most noticeable plummets on the board that we saw was with Jeremy Maclin. I mean, here's a true number one wide receiver. There is no other. There's no disputing that he is the number one receiver in Kansas City. And you didn't see him come off the board until what was it, late in the 5th round or midway through the 5th round. Very, very surprising.
Yeah, I was very surprised by that, and also not just tooting my own horn, but my team, I ended up getting Jordan Matthews in the 7th round, and he's another clear-cut number one receiver.
Right, an absolute.
Granted, they have a rookie quarterback throwing the ball now, but
I don't know if you call it a shocker, but another surprising turn of events was the way that Kirk Cousins fell. I mean, here is a guy who had first-round quarterback numbers at the end of last year. I know that people don't really expect him. Some people don't expect him to come back and repeat that, but still, for Boomer to be able to pick him up at the very last pick of the draft, knowing that Boomer also has Tom Brady, who's not going to be available for the first 4 games, I thought that was really something that really kind of dropped right into Boomer's lap.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's great for him. Like, he has a solid guy that could fill in for 4 weeks while Brady's missing time. And also, like, I love guys on contract years. Like, he only signed a 1-year deal with the Redskins.
Right. Absolutely.
And he's got to prove it again. So.
And it's funny. That's one of those things that a savvy fantasy owner will always kind of keep in the back of their mind, as if someone's in a contract year. Take Eddie Lacy, for example, right?
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people expect big things because he's in that contract year.
And we got CJ, who ended up getting him in the 2nd round. I think that's a great pick.
I think it is too. Yeah, I think you're definitely going to see a nice bounce back from Lacy this year. We also had some values that people really found some values in the draft in terms of picking up guys as they were kind of dropping a little bit and fortified their lineup. One of the ones that stood out to me was Justin Forsett. Everyone knows, the day before our draft, news comes across the wire that Forsett was released by the Ravens.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people hit the panic button, and that resulted in Bobby being able to pick up Justin Forsett, probably one of the good picks that he had during the draft.
Yeah, I mean, Brian obviously thought that Terrence West was going to be the starter after the release of that, and Brian took him in the 6th round, so that's not looking like such a great pick right now.
Yeah, and the other thing that surprised me was Carson Palmer. Speaking of quarterbacks, is Carson Palmer dropped all the way down to the 10th round. Here's a guy who was ranked 62nd overall in the Yahoo rankings, the rankings that our league abides by, and here he is being picked 138th overall. So, good for whoever got him.
Yeah, well, I think that a lot of people, like besides Bobby and Chris, who took quarterbacks in the first, like most people waited till those later rounds to grab their quarterbacks. Like Brian got Ben Roethlisberger in the 9th. I ended up getting Tyrod Taylor. Like, there's very serviceable guys that you can get much later where the numbers might not be that much different than those guys.
Absolutely. And one more thing that stood out to me was Marvin Jones. It's not that Marvin Jones was touted going into this year as a true number one, but you do hear a lot of buzz about what he's going to be able to do in that offense in Detroit. And he doesn't get picked up until the end of the 5th round. So here's a guy who could potentially put up wide receiver 1 numbers if things break right, and a steal at the end of the 5th round.
Yeah, I mean, I ended up getting him as my 3rd wide receiver, and I'm more than happy with that. Like, I've seen in the preseason the connection him and Stafford have had, and they're talking there that he's already ahead of Golden Tate, so I was more than willing to take that chance on Marvin Jones right there, and I hope it turns out to be the right pick.
Well, like I said before, we had a jam-packed, action-filled draft, and we're actually going to be back later on this episode to dive deeper into some of the things that we saw and actually give our draft grades, our best and worst draft grades as well. But right now, we want to take you guys to a segment that was recorded previously before the draft, a rare exclusive sit-down interview with our very reclusive reigning champion, Chris Holliday. Let's take you to that right now. Welcome. This is our episode 2 sit-down segment, and here we're with our reigning Corman champion, second time, 2-time Corman champion, Chris Holliday. He beat me in the championship game, so that's a bitter pill to swallow, but considering he dropped 140 points, even on my best day, there was no way I was dropping 140 points, so I've moved on, but he's actually brought with him the prize. Chris, tell us what you got there.
This is Joe. We're on a first name basis now since I've won him twice. I think me and my dearest brother Mike are the only ones multiple winners, but
Yeah, that's true.
the Corman himself, right here.
It's beautiful. Now, I didn't want to be outdone, so I just wanted everyone to know that I also have a trophy and a title
Gender war.
that I am defending. It is the Gender Wars 5 Flip Cup Championship.
Who was in that?
I'll be honest with you, nobody known to this world. But I will tell you that it was me and 5 women. And
Women are good at
back,
flip cup.
and I came back and rallied and beat
Yeah.
them all. So, more people care about this trophy, though, I will admit. Okay, so, really want to thank you for being here. You are like a recluse. It's hard to get a hold of you once the season starts, so I'm glad we were able to get you a few days before the
Man,
draft
a
here.
few words.
So, you got the ultimate prize here. This is your second Corman title. What does that mean to you? Can you put it into perspective, winning multiple times?
I would say I have a desire to win. I always want to go out there and win. Big competitor. It's a really good league. You know, you and your brother do a great job running it. It's a league for the people, so everyone kind of has like their say. Other than a couple hooligans, Mike Da Silva, Bobby Quinn, the league is everyone knows their stuff. So I would say it's a competitive league, and it's all for this right
It's all
here.
about the prize.
Yeah.
So you changed your name. Last year your name was?
Future quarters champ.
Right, which you held on to that tag for a long time.
Yeah.
Right, now your new name is?
How did I win last year?
Right, so explain the name change. What are you trying to convey other than just the name itself?
I've accepted the fact that I suck at quarters. It's Joe. He takes that throne for the Holiday family.
He does.
That's not my game.
Some would say what I am to Flip Cup against women,
Exactly.
Joe Holiday is with quarters. But
Exactly.
moving on, so.
The how did I win last year is kind of a shot at everybody else.
Right, yeah.
I went back and took a look at my drafted team. I had Andrew Luck first round, which nothing you can do about injuries. And LaShawn McCoy in the second round. So again,
Right.
injuries.
So your top 2 picks were basically non-factors,
Worthless.
right? I mean,
I think I started Denard Robinson in the finals against you. At running back.
I think he had a pretty good game.
Yeah, I might have been the only person in fantasy football last year that started Denard Robinson at running back. So the team was a joke. I had some solid wide receivers, but I don't think I had any right making it. And I mean, I came in second, I think, in the regular season, and I went on. Like
And
you
I'll
said,
tell you what,
140 points in the finals.
Yeah, if that team is a joke, the laugh is on everybody else because you really
You know, they played in the right moments. They came up.
They did, yeah.
Allen
They stepped
Robinson,
up, and a lot of
DeAndre.
and a lot of fantasy football really is timing, right? Having the right guy at the right time, and being smart enough to put him in. You know, so it's a convergence of things. Now, even though you're here, you're giving us this interview. Traditionally, you're pretty quiet by Corman standards, considering your high level of success. So, is that just your personality? Is that strategic? Do you not want to give? Do you not want to dangle any meat in front of your opponents? What's the deal?
Dangling of the meat. Yeah, try not to dangle my meat too many places. But,
Right. At least not in the Corman.
No.
I don't want to dangle meat.
Like I said,
Poor choice of words.
I'm a man of few words. I kind of like to let my play speak for itself.
Yeah.
I think I'm pretty good at the fantasy football. I think I've got it figured out now. So yeah, I let you guys do all the wittiness and the humor.
Like 3 holidays in the Corman. during the season, do things get tense with you guys? Is there a lot of trash talking between the brothers, or is it just taken in good fun?
Yeah, I think it's all in good fun. We're all competitive, so we all think we know everything about this guy or that guy, and for the most part we don't. I mean, Joe was just telling me before, he's got some really deep sleepers, so they have worked out for Joe in the past.
All right, so you have 2 titles, Mike has 3, Joe has none. Any advice for Joe?
Any advice for Joe? I would say change your last name, because he's a disrespect to the holiday name.
Just get one, Joe. Just gotta get one.
All you need is one.
But what are some things that you think about heading into a big draft, an important draft? What are some things that are on the forefront of your mind?
Good question. I always look to have the number 1 target for my quarterback. That's one of my goals.
Right.
So
Romo and Dez,
Yeah.
or Luck and Ty.
Yeah.
Right.
I think last year I finished up. I had Stafford because Luck went down, but Stafford and Golden Tate, who had a better second half of the year. His first half of the year was a little shaky, but I usually look for that, and I try not to put so much value into the running backs.
Right.
Because I feel like they get hurt. Like LaShawn McCoy goes down week 2, and you never see him again. There's always someone like a Carlos Williams,
Right,
that you can pick up on the waiver. Be one of those.
There's always a ton of guys who slip through the cracks, right? And they turn into big producers.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, listen, Chris, I want to thank you very much for joining us today. It is a rare appearance. I'm sure that we won't hear a peep from you until
Maybe a little on
possibly
Sunday.
Maybe on
The
Sunday.
trophy will be with me Sunday.
Then you go underground for a few months, and but thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Kevin.
it.
Glad to be here.
Good luck this season. Just
You too.
not more luck than me. And back to the studio to myself and Joe.
Peace.
Nice interview, Kevin. So, Joe, any thoughts?
I have lots of thoughts. One, congratulations to my brothers on multiple championships. Yes, I do not have any at the moment, and as you all know, I come very hard. And I will be coming hard for a championship this upcoming season.
Wait, how are you coming?
Hard!
Okay.
Very hard! I want it. That's all I'm going to say. I want it,
I got you.
and I want it hard.
Well, how do you top that? So, we're going to get back into some more of our draft analysis. We want to talk about some of the things that we noticed, some things that stood out to us in the draft. Joe, why don't you take it from here?
Yeah, well, I noticed Chris, Brian's friend, drafted standalone players very good with Julio Jones and Devontae Freeman, but both of them on the same team, so it's going to be hard for obviously both of them to score on the same drive. It cannot happen.
Right.
And also he has Jeremy Langford and Alshon Jeffrey, both running back receiver combo on the same team.
It's an interesting. It's a very rare thing to be able to get the number 1 receiver and runner for 2 different teams. That's
Yes.
quite an anomaly. Yeah.
Yeah, and De Silva, we all know the trade that went through right after the draft. Wayne, who was not here, wanted Adrian Peterson, so De Silva agreed to trade David Johnson, his first pick, or Wayne's first pick, for Adrian Peterson. But the funny thing is that De Silva drafted Jared McKinnon with his last pick, so God forbid anything happens to Adrian Peterson, that's going to bode very well for De Silva.
Right, so there is a scenario where if things break the right way, as in Adrian Peterson breaking his leg or something like that, De Silva will have really fleeced Wayne at that point.
Yes.
But as long as Adrian Peterson is healthy, that's really not a factor.
I mean, I don't know if that's because Wayne wasn't at the draft. He might have not known certain things that went on. Obviously, like he reached a couple of points in the draft for certain players. Sterling Shepard, he's a rookie, but in the 4th round, I think is quite a reach.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
And also we got Boomer, who ended up taking Matt Jones in the 4th round, who's injured right now. And honestly, your pick in the last round with Robert Kelly, I think if he starts the season as a starter, he could very well hold on to that job.
Absolutely. Now, what about quarterbacks? Talk to me about quarterbacks in this draft and what you noticed when you looked inside the numbers.
Yeah, well, I noticed a lot of the quarterbacks. There's not like a big difference between the top and the bottom, really. Like, we had 2 people take quarterbacks in the first round, but I noticed after going over the draft that a lot of people waited till later in the draft to take quarterbacks. Matter of fact, 8 of the owners took quarterbacks in the 9th round or later.
So it's more than half the league.
Yeah.
More than half the league taking quarterbacks 9th round or later.
I mean, Boomer with the last pick got Kirk Cousins, who's a solid starting quarterback. We have my brother Mike with Jameis Winston in the 10th. Chris Delahanty got Carson Palmer in the 10th. Brian got Ben Roethlisberger in the 9th. We have Bombo Berry, who got Blake Bortles in the 9th. You got Mariota in the 12th, or the 13th, I'm sorry, who's a great
He's a
quarterback.
sleeper guy, but has potential, right? There's some potential
Yeah.
upside there. And it really is a strange trend. And I think, when we looked inside the numbers and we really thought about it, I think one of the things that influenced a lot of owners' decisions was having one less bench spot available to you. And I think a lot of people really put an emphasis on trying to shore up their depth at skill positions, knowing that there is really not a great disparity between, say, the 5th or 6th best quarterback and the 16th or 17th best quarterback. I think that really played a factor in the trend that we saw to take quarterbacks on the back half of the draft.
Yeah, I totally agree that having that one less bench spot changed things a lot for even myself. Like, I wanted to make sure I had all my positions locked up, and I mean, it's tough because it's a 14-man league. We would like to have guys available on the waivers if need be. So
Right.
the bench spots are slim, but people are just going to have to work with it.
Absolutely. All right, now let's go best and worst grades for the draft. In terms of your best, who did you have for the best draft?
Not to be biased, I did not want to pick myself. So if I had to choose, I think I would go CJ. He ended up getting Odell at the 4th pick, which I think is a steal. We had my brother, superstitious as he is, refused to take him, afraid that he would get hurt because he's a Giant fan. And then Eddie Lacy in the 2nd, I think, is a solid number 1
Contract year
back.
for Lacy. We talked about that earlier. Yeah. Demarius Thomas for CJ, having a dominant wide receiver as your 2nd wide receiver.
I even like Forte, even though he's getting up there in age. I think he's a good asset as a running back. There's not much depth behind him with Powell, and he also has Powell, which he got later on, just in case anything does happen to Forte.
All right. Well, for me, I saw a few. I mean, look, several people had really good drafts. Like you, I was favorable to my own draft, but one of the things that I saw in your draft, Joe, was the fact that you were able to get such depth at your skill positions. To get Le'Veon Bell in the 2nd round, I know he's missing 3 games, but the fact that once he comes back, he's the clear-cut number 1 running option there, one of the best running backs in the league, bar none. A guy that could have been the number 1 draft, number 1 in the whole draft if it hadn't been for that suspension. Getting Abdullah and Rashard Jennings to help you solidify that until he gets back, as well as getting Hopkins, Michael Floyd, Marvin Jones. A really nice draft on your part. But the one who stood out to me as having the best draft, I have to say, would be Mr. Delahanty. I got to tell you, getting Julio Jones and Devontae Freeman, as well as Alshon Jeffrey and Jeremy Langford. I know that none of those, like they can't have great games in the same game, except when they do, right? And also, it almost guarantees you that one of those guys is going to hit on that team.
That's true.
Right? It really hedges your bet. On top of that, I think getting Decker in the 5th round, he's been a touchdown machine. Don't love Kelsey at tight end because he hasn't been on the field that much. But a lot of great depth for Delahanty. I really like what he did.
I like his pick with Chris Hogan in the 8th. I mean, The Patriots have a way of just making guys good, and he's one of those guys that I think could be a steal in the 8th round.
Well, it's funny. There's not a lot of receivers that go to New England as Pro Bowlers, but there's a lot that leave New England as Pro Bowlers. So that's an interesting opportunity for Mr. Hogan. Now, in terms of your worst draft.
My worst draft, it has to be Bobby by far. One, taking a quarterback in the 1st round, I think that was just a wasted pick. And Brandon Marshall, he's good, but he didn't draft his first running back until the 4th round, which happened to be my handcuff, D'Angelo Williams. So if you take a deeper look at Bobby's draft here, he really doesn't even have a starting running back on his roster.
Yeah, I mean, his first running back that comes off the board is a guy who's really only going to play in 3 meaningful games. And then he's basically hoping that something happens to Le'Veon Bell.
And then he drafted Spencer Ware in the 5th round, which I thought was also a reach. Like, yes, Jamal Charles is hurt, but I think we all know Jamal Charles is that starting running back.
And look, the Chiefs are going to take their time getting Jamal Charles healthy, but when he's back, he's the guy who's getting the touches. The other thing is not only do I feel like he took Gostkowski too early, but then he drafted a second kicker in the 13th round. It really was kind of head-scratching, some of the moves that he made.
Some of the moves by a lot of the owners were head-scratching to me. A lot of defenses went earlier than expected, with Wayne taking the Giants as like the first defense off the board.
Yeah, that was interesting too. I mean, for me, I saw a couple things that I didn't like. I don't love Boomer's depth at running back, or even his starting running backs, if I'm being completely honest with you. Taking Matt Jones in the 4th round as your first running back, and then LeGarrette Blount, who's your second. Look, Matt Jones has health issues. LeGarrette Blount, who knows what's going to happen, but there haven't been a lot of prolific runners that have come out of that New England offense. I will say he does, Boomer does have some great depth at wide receiver, and that's what saves him. For me, the worst draft has got to go to Wayne. I'm sorry. I got to say it. I know that we all have things that come up, and maybe it was a very legitimate reason why you missed the draft yesterday, but none of us knew until the very last minute that you weren't going to be there. And because of that, your team was essentially auto-drafted and cobbled together.
We drafted him a very comparable team.
Right, yeah, and I agree. His team is very competent, but, I got to give the worst draft to the guy who wasn't at the draft and still walks away with a pretty decent team. And in a way, you could say I'm calling you out, Wayne, and I'm sorry. Like I said, there might have been something very legitimate, so, don't take it personal, but 13 owners were there, and you were not. Which is a nice transitioning point to our next segment.
And your name is on that trophy.
And your name is on that trophy. You have almost more of a responsibility, some would say, to be there for the draft. Which brings us into our next segment, which is a weekly segment that we do. It's our Corman Call-Outs. Last week, CJ had some very, very, very strong words for Bombo. Bombo, on the message board, did not take it lightly, and apparently is not taking it lightly in the Corman Call-Outs either. Let's take a look.
What the fuck is going on, Corman? First, I want to take this time to thank you guys all for welcoming me into this awesome league. It was definitely a pleasure last year. I had fun. It was a great time for some of us. I'm excited for it to start again for sure. This weekly podcasting you guys are doing is awesome. Looking forward to those every week. This first one, or the first installment, was great. So I guess I'm going to segue into my response and take this time to call out one fancy football fancy. Fancy like to say, point 2 things out. A, that this is my first year in the Corman. I guess he's trying to say that me, of all people, should be any less outspoken, but that's just never going to happen. And B, that it was only my second year as a fantasy manager, and yet the newbie finished 3rd as a newcomer to the league, and only a newbie in actually being a fantasy manager. I'm sure it's tough being knocked out by a newcomer, but I'll take that. I'll take it any day of the week. It also must be tough being beaten and fall to 6th place by a team named Garbage Time. Only garbage can't beat a team named Garbage Time. But you know what? It's done. It's over. It's all in the past. Fancy and I have 2 more games this season to showcase our abilities and go head-to-head. I'm excited about it. Fancy probably shouldn't be. But we'll leave it at that. I'm excited. Sunday's going to be great. That's it. Anthony Berry signing out.
Well, those are some very heated words from our member Bombo Berry to CJ Aker.
Absolutely, quite a response, but remember, he's just firing back at what CJ did last week. And you know what? We don't have to wait long to see what's going to happen, because in week 1, they get to square off against each other.
I'll be watching that matchup closely. One to watch.
Absolutely.
And we also have my brother versus Boomer, who finished at the bottom of the league last year.
Yeah, the two bottom feeders, but nobody can forget that big blow up they had about midway through the year when Boomer and I made that trade last year
yes.
for Julian Edelman.
Very heated.
Caused a lot of waves and really drove a spike between those two. And then we have the battle of two brothers. And coming off of the words that were said, you're going to have a chance to respond to your brother's interview.
Very, very looking forward to facing him week 1. He's the defending champion, and I would love nothing more than just take him down.
Absolutely. Looking forward to that. Also, the rest of our slate of games in week 1, Brian versus Wayne. We have Adrian Peterson going against the Beers. We have 3 times quarters champ Bailey is going against me, Knuckles, as well as Da Silva, Dak Attack, going up against Bobby, hashtag Kickers Lives Matter. That's all the time we have for this week. Thank you once again for joining us. Leave comments, like us, the little thumbs up there underneath the video. Make sure you like us, view us multiple times if you have to so we get that view count up. We appreciate you guys checking in with us this week. Signing off from, once again, Sweaty Garage Studios here in beautiful Hamilton, New Jersey. Ave atque vale. See you next week. Good night.